because
I
it's like
took a
4 o'clock.
sip. What?
It's like 4 o'clock over there, isn't it?
No, it's 2. I'm behind you.
I always forget. I don't know which way the sun goes. I don't
Why
know
should
how.
Come on. It goes west, but
Yeah, you know how I remember that is at the end of Shanghai Noon with
Jackie Chan?
Lucky Chan and Owen Wilson.
Yeah.
At the end, he goes, "The sun rises in the east, but it sets in the west," and then he like kills the bad guy or something.
I didn't see that movie. That's
I
a
think
cool line though.
I've been doing this thing where I have been trying to start the show where I can like intermingle our theme song, but I
Mhm.
don't know if it's
Functioning.
Functioning. Functioning.
Functioning.
Functioning.
Functioning.
Examples of functioning. Navigational sensors aren't functioning. Glad to see you still fully functioning.
You know what I've been doing recently? So after Spotify Wrapped dropped and Spotify basically told me that I've been depressed all year because I've
yeah,
listened to nothing but Jason Isbell.
mine was Jason Molina, the two sad Jasons.
Yeah, I had on my top 5 songs, 4 of them were Jason Isbell, and then one of them was American Aquarium. So I've stopped listening to music with words altogether, and I've only listened to um, chanting playlists, and this playlist that's like I think it's 538 hertz is the music. Something it's I don't know what, maybe there's like music nerds out there that know what I'm talking about, but it's all like the music is at 538 hertz. And
Is it
so I've
just
just been,
droning?
what?
Is it just droning?
No,
At
no,
that
no. It's like it feels very new agey.
is it
Um,
like there's this new thing, I think it's like green noise or something like that. There's
I don't
like
know what
white
that is.
noise, brown noise, and green noise, and I think it's
No,
something.
this is like there is some kind of lyricism to it. Like this guy, shout out Animal, Anomal. But he's got this playlist that's just his music that he's put out it's made at 538 hertz. And supposedly that's a good frequency to put in your mind. So
Interesting.
I just gotta stop putting in depressing sad bastard music and hip hop.
It's hard to get out of that. My
Yeah.
Spotify Wrapped it was like Jason Molina, Songs Ohia, which is his like super sad,
Mm.
super duper sad, like hangover sad stuff. And then it was Magnolia Electric Company, which is like his not as sad stuff, like more country inspired. Like I think Magnolia Electric Company is like on a Jason Isbell level,
Okay.
where where and then like where like Songs Ohia is like if you heard me listening to it, you'd be like, "Are you okay?
Right.
Uh, did I call someone?" And then it was like 1, 2, 3. It was like all, and then it was like Jason Molina's solo stuff, which is even more like I'm gonna call someone. And then 4 was Princess Nokia, who was this like like non-binary rapper from Brooklyn, and like super fun. Like her best song is like just her like it's called Tomboy. It's just her going around saying her little titties and fat belly. It's very fun stuff. Completely opposite of what I was listening to.
Yeah,
And then
totally.
5 was Smog, which is the band that Jason Molina was in before he went on his own.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I don't know if that. Yeah, it was all the same, and it was because I used to go to sleep to that and wake up to that and walk around to that. It's you get stuck in that shit. You get stuck in that sad loop, and then when you start listening to happier music, you're like, I don't know. I don't know if I'm ready to get out of it.
Yes, that's the thing. That's what's kept me listening to Jason Isbell for so long. Is the like, it's kind of like with drinking. Like I'm so attached to this type of music. My identity is almost wrapped up in this sad bastard tune. Like I like driving at night. I'm still sober, but I could go to a bar right now. It could, like, I got something in my heart where my wife has left me always. Um, but then you start listening to like nicer music, And yeah, you have that kind of reaction where you go, is this me? Is this who I am?
Yeah, I mean,
Maybe
it's
I'm not
hard.
ready.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you listen to like "Cover Me Up,"
Yeah.
and like start your day with "Cover Me Up," and you're just like sitting in your bed, writhing, you're lonely, or you're
Hmm.
like driving to work, and then you got to get out of the car and like, "Good morning," and you're like, I'm just used to faking it, I guess. I started listening to a lot of Spanish music because I'm trying to teach myself Spanish.
No, that's good.
I found some like really good like Colombian kind of bops.
Hmm.
That's been helping because I think I've said this on the podcast before. I hate when I'm listening to music and it's not about me, but when it's in another language, all of it's about me.
All of it's about you. Yeah.
Yeah, I can relate to every word.
That's funny. I got I think that the music stuff is working because my priest came up to me today and he said, "Hey, you look good. You look happy." And I said, "Well, is that not normal? Like, is that out of the ordinary?" He said, "Well, I don't know. Like, you're so broody." And that was like our conversation. He just left and went to eat pancakes or something. And I was just thinking, maybe this is working. Maybe I'm feeling good. Uh,
You weren't like, have you heard of Jason Isbell? Let me throw you some albums.
yeah. So I don't know. I think that
A week later, and he's broody. He's like,
well, I think he should be more broody. He's Irish. That's what I thought that they were all like. But he's very like top of the morning to you type Irish. He's not Irish, but he's clearly ancestrally linked.
oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
But anyway, it's really important to understand like what you're putting into your body through your ears. Like music is such a prevalent societal thing. Like music is everywhere, and just being aware of what the frequency of the music that you're putting in, what the lyrics that you're putting in, all that
Yeah,
kind of stuff affects your mind.
yeah, that is a fact.
Yeah.
I uh I was at work the other day and someone was talking about like what we listen to when we drive, and
Mm.
someone told me they don't listen to anything. They
Good
just
for
drive.
them.
I was horrified, frankly. I was scared out of my mind.
What do
I
they
was,
do? Do they just think the whole way?
I don't know. That was what scared me. I was genuinely worried about them and their own like I was like, are you broken or are you you're either like a Zen master that
Hmm.
you've reached this point where you're like so okay with your thoughts that you're just sort of like flowing with them,
Right.
or you're just so broken that any music will just like trigger you into a point. I don't know. It was so abnormal to me. And like I think it's because that's what my dad does. My dad just drives in silence and then like clears his throat every 5 miles. But like and it just like brought me to this like, are you just like sitting in this like rage seat just driving, or does music not speak to them? But they listen, they know about music a little bit, and they are into the arts. It was at work, so they're like a creative person, but they
Hmm.
just drive in silence. And it's just like something that I've never conceptually. If I drove in silence, it's mainly because my radio was stolen.
But wait, I like we've talked about this before, where I'll drive in silence, but it helps to like lube your mind a little bit because um,
Let's say oil. I don't. Let's not say lube. Let's say oil. There's other words.
it helps oil your mind a little bit, and that's when like in the car when I'm alone, no music going. That's the best time. I'll have great conversations with myself. I'll do really long monologues, depending. Like when I'm moving out of I would have like
Zen, are you broken or are you a Zen master? I don't know.
I don't think I'm either of those things because I'm still talking. A Zen master could at least be silent, but I'm in my car going, just talking about tulpas and stuff to myself, you know?
Yeah, I think that might be broken.
That might be
Uh,
broken. I'll take that. That's okay.
yeah, I don't know. I run in silence. That was something, but that's different. I do that just because it's about accepting, like experiencing the world around me. And I've driven in silence in old cars because then you can listen if the engine's gonna die on you or not. But like there's like practical things with that.
Right.
But in like a newer car where it's almost like they're almost like completely noise proof, I don't know. I don't know if I can do it.
Well, why don't you like that's a great time to really figure out what's going on with you. Like if you sit down with yourself, you got maybe a 20-minute drive. You're in Chicago, so it's a little different, but you got a 20-minute drive, 30-minute drive, you're commuting to work. That's a great time to just sit and go, Tom, what's going on with you? What's up? How are you feeling? Why are you so mad all the time?
I'm
That-
talking to myself, but I'm referring to myself as you.
Well, if we go like, back to the platonic thing, maybe I'm just a picture in
That's
your mind too.
Are you saying you're a tulpa?
Yeah, maybe I'm a tulpa.
This is tangential, but I was thinking yesterday why we were friends, and I realized that you're Sum 41 and I'm the offspring, and that's why you're like, you're like a kind of the same but different, and I'm like, you know what I mean? Like I feel like that works as a
No, I think that's good. Yeah.
I have been thinking a lot today about not today, but recently about abandonment, broadly
Oh,
about abandonment. I had this competition earlier this month, and I lost. I had two fights. I got third, but I was also one of I was there was only three people that showed up. So I mean, I won by showing up, which is the lesson, right? Showing up is literally most of the battle. But I it was interesting because I could feel when I was fighting these guys that I was more experienced than they were. But there were like certain levels where I wasn't fighting for myself, like I was giving it to them almost. And I had been really ruminating on that. And then with the end of the year coming up, I mean, it's literally the 31st today. Uh, I've just been thinking about how this whole journey of this whole year and beyond has been just a process of learning how to not abandon myself in different ways, because it was something that was I learned, right? It was like I learned it from my caretakers at the time who also abandoned me in a lot of different ways and like didn't stand up for me in a lot of different ways. And so I didn't stand up for myself.
mm,
And I've noticed I've noticed that it's like it's almost on a it's like every breath there's a an opportunity to stand up for myself and not abandon myself. Every thought can be adjusted in a way that gives me more I don't know how to phrase it, agency, I guess, right? Of how it gives me like how I'm directing myself, right? Like how
mm.
I can direct my thoughts, how I can direct my actions. And that's why I sent you that quote, which I've immediately forgotten. Uh, the samurai quote from the Book of the Five Rings.
That's a good
Uh,
book.
yeah, the way you do anything is the way you do everything, which is interesting because there are times when I've been like, "Oh, fuck this, it doesn't matter. I'm not gonna do this shit." And so I kinda like
Mm.
slapdash it together, and I've realized that that's been the habit. And I know what you're gonna say. Maybe I should be editing these podcasts a little bit more succinctly. But the thing is, I'm not slapdashing it together. This is part of my artistic journey, and maybe you're right. But yeah, I've been kind of focusing on that. I've been thinking about how in what ways, like that's the thing that's been interesting is that with my own sobriety, like my Christmas was super depressing. Every Christmas is very depressing to me.
Mm.
Everyone leaves for a fucking week. And before that, for a whole month, everyone's like, "Oh yeah, what are you doing for the holidays?" And then I have to like either be like, "Oh, I'm estranged from my family, so nothing." Or I just be like, "Oh yeah, nothing." Or I'd be like, "I'm gonna stay here and just chill out." I have to like either brush it off and then everyone's like, "Oh, I'm gonna go here. I'm gonna go see my family." Um, And then when they get back, it's just like there's just 5 days of me being by myself,
Mm.
which sounds great, but I think that's kind of the thing that made me even start this podcast, is that I am so hungry for connection. I'm so like desperate. I don't want to say desperate, but I know that there's an absence of connection throughout the timeline of my life. And what I've been trying to do is forge these connections in this period of my life when it feels like a lot of people are already kind of like already settled in their connections, already solidified with their connections, and I have to kind of tiptoe around it while also not entirely sure how to do that, who I am to make those connections, and also not abandoning myself just for that connection, which is how I've gotten in so many terrible relationships, terrible friendships. And the beginning of my year began with me being obscenely depressed. I like the lowest I'd ever been. And like I had gotten out of that terrible relationship in October. My best friend, now ex best friend at the time, fucking just like left, even though I was like, hey, I'm like losing my mind. I just got out of this like, bad relationship where I was desperately alone for a very long time. Um, and then I was just alone for almost like 3 months. And the only people I had to talk to were people at my gym and the people at my yoga studio and my therapist. Like we weren't even talking that much back then. And I made a huge list of like what I wanted to do this year so that this doesn't happen again.
Mm.
Like I was like, man, my holidays next year are going to be good. And I was partially successful, which is just as great as showing up and winning third, because Thanksgiving was great. I like hung out with Leah and and her friends, and we all had like a really good time. Halloween was okay. It could have been better, but I had like a really good time at work. We won like the Halloween costume contest as a group. And so like that kind of solidified that memory. And but like Christmas brought me right back to this like abject loneliness that I've experienced for most of my life.
Mm.
And I was just smoking weed and watching Lord of the Rings and crying because I had no Frodo or Sam. I couldn't figure out if I was an elf or a hobbit, and I think I'm a hobbit. Uh, I think I'm an elf, a different kind of elf, but I'm a hobbitish elf. You know what I mean?
Okay.
And so, yeah, and so I was just like spending all day just in this weird haze. Winter in Chicago is kind of weird. I haven't seen the sun in like a month, I think. Uh, and so it was weird. And then like suddenly the day after Christmas, everyone comes back, and they're like, "Oh, how was your Christmas?" And I have to be like, I can't just be like, "Oh, it was an exploration of abject loneliness." Uh, it was horrifying. I just have to be like, it was good. It was chill. I watched a lot of Lord of the Rings. Here are my, I wrote like all of these jokes about Lord of the Rings, like that Hobbit one. Um, these deflectors.
Yeah.
It was like it was kind of like the accumulation of self-abandonment, like not speaking up for myself, not doing the right things to connect with different people, not showing up to like classes or even showing up mentally when I'm interacting with other people, or staying present in those moments and sort of just like slapdashing my recovery together, um, so that it just felt like showing up was enough, which in a lot of ways at first it was, but I feel like I've reached a point where it's like there needs to be a little bit more intentionality into it.
Mm.
And I've been taking these smaller steps all throughout the year, like starting this podcast, getting people on, hearing their stories, talking about sobriety and recovery, hanging out with you, reconnecting with like old comedy buddies like Max and shit, like that all was super helpful. But there's still this ringing issue of self-abandonment. Like, it's okay to rest actively, but I need to like know when to get up and start moving even though I don't want to.
Mm.
Because I it's not about what I want now, it's about what I want later. You know what I mean? So it's like it's been this like delicate tightrope. But I think that's like really linked to my to why I drank. Because I think I brought up in the podcast before, like loneliness was my biggest trigger. And I had spent a lot of my life in the background, like a character to other main characters, or even like a sidekick. And I'm going into my Nightwing phase. I'm getting out of my Robin phase. I'm going into my Nightwing phase. But alcoholism would be Batman in that, I guess. I don't know.
Mm.
I don't know how that analogy works. But yeah, it's been an interesting thing, which is why with especially with like these um, sort of recent losses from people in our past that we've been hearing about, and like a lot of just the way my life is going, I've been really just ruminating on what it means to stand up for yourself on like a molecular level, abstractly, not like literally molecular.
Right.
Like getting high. Every time I got high recently, I would be like high, and then I'd be like, okay, well now I'm high and I'm by myself and I'm watching Lord of the Rings and I'm scrolling Reddit and I'm bored as fuck. But then I will be like, okay, well now I have this feeling. What should I do? And I'll get up and I'll be like, okay, I guess I could go for a walk. I guess I could cook some food. And that's where I'm losing a little bit of myself, is in these like hours of indecision.
Mm. There's a word that I can't find right now, but that indecision, it's really, it's a scary concept to me, is indecision, because it's where you get stuck for years.
Yeah.
You can get stuck for days, months, but some people get stuck there for actual years, where you have the same conversation with them over and over again about, well, I could do this and I could do that and I could do this and I should do that, but I'm either scared or I'm unwilling or the money's not there or some excuse, where they end up not doing anything. And I mean, I'm a really good example of this, because I spent years getting drunk and deciding that I would, I would get drunk and then I would write down like fantasies or goals, and set highfalutin things that I could accomplish. Um, and I'd get really jazzed up about it. And then I'd wake up the next day and it would be the same repeating loop of, well, I don't know why I said that. It's pretty lame to have goals like that, or I can't really accomplish that. I don't know who I think I am. I am Now I'm even more depressed that I even thought that that was a good idea, or just like
I guess I'll just
whatever.
go back into the bar
Yeah,
and
yeah,
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 yeah.
exactly. I might as well just go back to the bar, and then you find yourself in the
That
same
too.
BS like trap. You just trap yourself in that.
Yeah,
It's so
or
much easier
you're like, okay, I'm gonna do all these things, but first I gotta get sober. And then
yeah.
you realize, oh shit, that's like a big deal.
Yeah. So I think a lot of it has to do with giving yourself the grace of every day acknowledging that you're already doing quite a bit. Like,
Yeah.
just by recovery and staying sober, it's like, holy crap, that's a lot. Just like you said, you don't really appreciate how difficult it is until you're in it. And then it just keeps getting harder and then easier in some ways and blah blah blah. And then you start thinking, well, I got to do something with this energy, you know. I got to do something. I can't just be sober. And you can. right? You can just be sober. Um, but I think that like we've talked enough to know this about each other. It's like you don't you're not like a complacent guy. You don't want to stay in a baseline. You don't want to plateau. You want other things. Um, and so finding ways to live with that grace of every day's hard and also just putting a little bit more on your plate each day. Um,
And just trying to, yeah, I think, yeah. Sorry, I interrupted.
no, you're fine because I think that that's the hard part is building your plate. But I think that the plate itself is sobriety and maybe not and recovery, but that's your foundation for everything else that you put on it. And for someone like for what you've been talking about, like when Christmas rolls around and a portion of your plate goes away, like friends leaving Chicago, you still have a big plate. So it's not a huge um it doesn't like it's not a huge it's not as big of a loss as it could
Yeah,
be.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it didn't help that I had a cold too, so I couldn't go to jujitsu.
That
And so,
also, yeah, that dude, getting sick like this past couple of months has been debilitating. Like I swear, like it was Christmas Eve and Christmas where I finally broke down and I told my girlfriend I was like I think I'm depressed because I haven't been able to do anything for a month and a half. I'm like losing my mind. And
yeah.
then after that I started getting better, but I that despair like slowly encroaches during the holidays anyway. But if you're sick and you can't do anything, it
I
speeds
mean,
up the
especially when
process.
you have COVID and you're just like, "Well, I could go to a coffee shop, but then I would kill everybody at the coffee shop." And then you're like, "Okay, well, I guess I'll go for a walk, but I'm super tired. I guess
Mhm.
I'll read, but I have brain fog." And it's like, "I guess I'll just sit here and wait to die." You know, like, because I had COVID last year and it was around this time too, and it was just like, "Fuck."
Yeah.
But I think that, like, that back to what we were talking about, that the way you do anything is the way you do everything. In regards to the plate, I think the issue I'm having is that I have spent so much of my life disassociating.
Mm.
And in that, like, oh, I'm like in that drunken state where I'm like, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna have all these dreams and do that and like follow this. And then I wake up and I'm super hungover. And there's like a timeline where all of those things happened. And like there's like a universe
Mm.
out there where all of those things happened. And and then so I my brain is like, oh, that's the life I'm living, but I'm not present. And I think that's what, because it was written by this samurai warrior who I am not even going to try to say his name. Well, maybe I will. Miyamoto Musashi, who was like, and the reason he's saying that is because he had won like 60 duels,
Yeah.
like samurai fights to the death. And in those fights, you got to be present and you got to be able to react to stay alive. And that's kind of what I like about jujitsu is like that's what brought me out of my disassociated state is like, if you zoom out, if you zone out for a little bit, you're going to get choked.
Yeah.
Or if you're doing like if I was doing when I was doing Muay Thai, I was like, this is if I kind of zone out for a second, I'm gonna get punched in the face. And when I was doing a bunch of yoga, that's all I was doing. I was just like deep into my disassociated states. And
Mm.
then now I've been really focused on my breathing. I've been reading this book called Breathe by James Nestor. Super good. Highly recommend it. But I've been really focused on like my nose breathing, my body, and trying to enjoy these small incremental things that I'm doing to widen my plate. But it's like but it's like, okay, but I'm also, I used to be a really good cook. In the last like 5, 6 years or so, I have completely given up on that. And I'm like eating like chickpeas out of a can. And, and be like, this is nutritious. And but that's because I'm not present. I'm like staring at my phone, getting high, watching Lord of the Rings, and is not present. I'm falling into a disassociative state. I'm letting my parasympathetic nervous system go into this like freeze state, and
Mm.
I'm not actively resting or actively healing. And the reason why he says that is that to learn how to survive in a fucking samurai duel, you have to maintain that presence in everything you do. So when you're cooking, that presence has to be involved in the act of cooking. And while we're talking, that presence has to you have to be here so that because that is like a learned thing. That is like that's it's like I'm starting to realize that everything is a muscle. And if you let something uh I never say this word right, atrophy, if you let anything, even your own mind atrophy, it will just you'll lose it. Or you'll have to spend some time building it back up. And I think that's where that self-abandonment comes from, is that I get to a point of presence where my body or my mind freaks the fuck out and is like, "Whoa, hey, we haven't like disassociated in a while." And
Oh yeah.
or it'll get to a point where like the like the fight, like my brain will, instead of being like, "Hey, what if instead of my brain will freak out in the fight," which was something that I struggled with a lot, where like my body would actually go into like a fear state, and I had to like learn how to get out of that. But now I've trying to be more present in the fight, and I'm trying to remember, but then my brain is not uh, coming up with like the creative ways that I could like do something, and I'm just allowing this person to overcome me. Um, and that comes from being in those moments more and more through training. But I also think that comes from believing in myself that I know what I'm doing and not
Mm.
letting my brain be like, because my brain will just flip out and be like, oh shit, you're about to win or you're about to do something awesome. You've never done that before. Fuck it. And then and then I'm like, what if you did? And then I go off into this dream state.
Yeah.
And then the next thing I know, because like next thing I know, I have this guy, mounted on top of me, and I'm spending the whole match trying to get him off me. And his coach is literally yelling at him, being like, "Okay, now grab his arm and put his arm." And I'm like, I know what he's trying to do to me, and this guy doesn't even know. His coach is coaching him on top of me, and I can't get him off of me. Uh, and like, and I think that comes from this learned belief in myself that I
Mm.
don't deserve to be present. And that's what I mean by self-abandonment.
Mm.
And so it's hard. Like even when I'm in yoga, I'll be like like I remember when I was first trying to stay in the moment in yoga class, and I would it would come in it would be in like increments. And I would it was almost like I would get really annoyed. It's like we were saying about driving in silence. I would suddenly I like hear everything. Like I hear everyone grunting and sighing and like I've been riding the bus without headphones because I lost my headphones. And it's just people coughing. And and like it's just, weird sounds. And I get like super annoyed and I get bored and I want to like go somewhere else. And then I finally come out of it at the end of my ride and I realize, oh, I've been clenching my teeth and I've been slouching this whole time. And now my
Yeah.
fucking back hurts.
Yeah.
And now I got to spend time trying to like get this knot out of my back because I've been slouching in this, in this bus seat for an hour. And, and so I've been like trying to be more present with my body by keeping my back straight. But it's just like the more I stay present, the more challenging it becomes. And I think that's what that means is like the way you do one thing is how you do everything, is that you just, you have to, I have to learn to stay present in every moment, which is hard because a lot of my pontificating comes from my own disassociation, right? Like you were saying, like you're driving and you're talking to yourself about tulpas. Like
Yeah.
that's part of it. But I'm also like, I am like king of daydreaming. That's like part of my job. And so it's like, but there is a balance there. Like I feel like I can daydream and like daydream with intention, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is something I have to do with my job a lot. And that shit is fucking hard. And I think it's because so much of my life has been pretty chaotic. And
Yes.
so the investing in any sort of intention was worthless because it would just blow up at any moment, or I'd be abandoned by like other people in my life whenever I tried to get like my foot in the door of my presence, or like when I tried to start something new. And so I just learned that it's worthless to even try in that way.
Mm.
And so now it's about relearning how to actually focus on those things and maintain that focus, or not so much focus, but that presence
Yeah.
for for longer than an hour and stuff like that. I've been doing this thing where I don't bring my computer to work, or I mean, when I don't bring my computer to meetings, and it's because I'll be in a meeting, and next thing I know, I'm like on Facebook, I'm reading about the Mothman of Chicago, and then they're like, "Jody, what do you think?" And I have no fucking clue what just happened.
Yeah.
And that is bad. And it's like, but it's because I've spent so many hours just like in these meetings where my 2 cents wasn't really taken it wasn't taken seriously. And so I just stopped trying. But now I'm in a new position where they actually care about what I think. And I have to be like, oh, fuck. Well, I haven't been paying attention for the last 5 years of my career, so I don't know what's going on. And it's like, it's a problem, you know? And I think that all comes down to just this concept of resisting self abandonment, abandoning self abandonment, which could be the title of this show.
uh, there's a concept in Orthodoxy called it's the Greek word is nepsis, and it means watchfulness. And the idea is what you're getting at, which is being very hyper vigilant as to where our thoughts are and as to what we're thinking. Um, and the this is an extreme example, but in Orthodoxy, especially in monastic Orthodoxy, images in the mind are treated as almost like anathema, like the fantasies, the glitter, these mental pictures. They're they're going to lead us astray, and they're going to lead us away from watchfulness. They're going to basically what I do in my car. Like they'll just capture me and take me wherever they're going to take me, in this kind of fantastical, daydreamy, and now I'm somewhere else. I'm outside of my body. I'm I'm living. Maybe I'm living in like a ideal state, like whatever it is. But the it's all to capture your mind and take you away from this state of presence, which is um, in a Christian sense, I guess it would be best to describe the idea of presence being very godly, because it's still you're just aware. Your awareness is um, your interior awareness is amplified. Your spiritual awareness is larger, and you're very very present. Um,
Because you're appreciating existence.
and you're just existing.
Yeah.
Your being is so rooted in presence that you are not just appreciating existence, you are existence in a certain sense. um and you know the idea of like training your mind to be present for long periods of time, you know, that's what a practice of meditation is all about. And you know, for myself, a practice of prayer, it's life is a prayer. And so trying to stay in that constant state of presence through prayer is, I guess, trying to attain that watchfulness over yourself. Because I don't know, man. It's like the deeper I get into this whole idea of prayer being presence, the more aware I feel like I am of not just my own disassociating faculties or disassociating leniences, but also just the idea that disassociation kind of slips up on you through, I mean, you just like you said, like you're on the bus and now you're somewhere else almost immediately. And then
Yeah.
you come back at your stop and like, where were you the whole time?
Yeah, it's almost like blacking out.
No, it's exactly that. I think that's
Yeah.
exactly what it is.
Yeah, and I hate that. That's the thing that kinda got me down this journey was that I fucking hated blacking out. And now I'm finding that I'm like and I'm sober and I'm still blacking out in different ways, and I'm like,
Yeah.
"Fuck." And what you just said kinda did you ever read Franny and Zoe?
Wait, is that
J.D. Salinger?
the Jesus prayer?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's exactly what this I'm talking about.
You're talking about the Jesus prayer. Yeah,
Yeah.
they bring that up. Let's can you do you know more about it? I only know it in the terms of that story.
So the book that's they reference in that book is a book that I can't recommend more. I can't recommend highly enough. It's called The Way of the Pilgrim, and it's probably one of the best books I've ever read. Um, and the idea is that, and I've worn this we brought this up in the past, but if you have video, you can see this is a Komoskini or a prayer rope. And the idea behind the Jesus prayer is that every bead you pray the Jesus prayer. And it's in Orthodoxy, in Holy Orthodoxy, they call it the prayer of the heart because the idea is that you pray it unceasingly to the point where you descend the prayer, you descend your conscious awareness, you descend it into your heart, and that's where it lives. And then at some point, that this is what they've talked about. I've never experienced this myself, but this in the lives of the saints, they've described the prayer, the repetition of the prayer lives on in the heart almost unconsciously at a certain point, and that's what like locking the heart watchfulness um, means, where you're again, this is like a Christian modality, so the name of Jesus Christ is written on your heart, and also your heart kind of like pumps it into your body. And you live in that presence where Jesus was present. Um, and so, like you were talking earlier about the guy that sits in like
Mantra or an It's like
it's kind of like that. Yeah, exactly.
it's
It's
like
it.
breathing though. It isn't the idea of the prayer is that it helps regulate well, okay, so I'm just saying the physical idea of the prayer is to help regulate your breathing. That's kind of how I've always because the
Yeah, because
words go
you
breathing in, out.
the
Yeah.
phrasing you match with your breath, especially if you do it internally. So
Because I
like
also read recently, sorry, I
no no
also
no
read recently that Yahweh was actually, which is the name of God by, I guess, Jewish tradition, I guess so.
Israelites, yeah.
Yeah, but it was actually not the vowels weren't in there.
Mhm.
From what I've read, it was just, and it was actually just an exhale and inhale. Was I think that's in that James Nestor book I was reading, and it's almost like they're always saying like when you say the name of God, you'll bring like great power or things like that. But really, it's like from what I'm hearing, it's like these are ways to have a physical presence through with a spiritual twist to it, right? There's
That's a really good way to put it.
yeah, I'm starting to discover that a lot of religion is just sort of uh, teaching people how to be more present in their bodies using religion and metaphor and allegory. And then that was all twisted for power. But it's like, it seems like, like what you're saying, like the Jesus prayer is about Jesus and like alms are about, whatever, like they have these symbolisms, but it all comes down to being like practical teachings for a more present life. That's kind of what I'm starting to get
Well,
into.
and I think that's a really good point because they're I can't really speak for other religions, but there was a really good sermon. I can't remember the priest who gave it. It was an Anglican priest who gave this sermon about Christ and his ministry, which Christ's ministry was, quote, being with, end quote. And it if you go through the Bible and yeah,
Just being with.
being with.
Okay.
And so, when you look at Christ's actions, what he was doing was always just being with people. He was being with the the sinners, the publicans, he was with the religious leaders in some sense. Sometimes he was being more aggressive with them than others, but he was being with people who were sick, people who were, the prostitutes, the lepers, the again, like I said, the publicans, these people who society at the time looked down upon, but he uh, embodied a presence with them. And I like it. I really like what you just said, because it is true. I think that the deeper you get into a religious modality, the more you understand that it is teaching you how to be in your life. It's like trying to show you how to be in your heart and in your body. It's unfortunate that, like, well, actually, maybe it's a good thing. Like the idea of somatic stuff is kind of becoming more contemporary, more
Yeah.
popular,
Yeah.
and I think an application of that in a, certainly westernized Christianity would help it so much, because if we treat this stuff so cerebrally, we'll just end up going off into fantasy land, or just becoming disassociated through religion, which is not what we want. But that's how we end up getting like religious traumatization or church hurt
Yeah.
and stuff.
Yeah.
Which is,
Or like your own planet.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Or like weird cults that promise things that aren't existing. And so they're like, you're not really living. There's like, there's this thing at the end of the rainbow, but it's like, no, we're at the rainbow, my man. This is it.
that's it. The kingdom of God is within you. I don't know why that's not written on everybody's church, but Christ said that, and like this is where we're at.
Yeah.
Um,
But that's just that. So one thing that I've been kind of like a lot of this, I read a lot of more Zen kind of stuff, and like a lot of yoga stuff. And then my own struggles with asthma and my own struggles with the my past and stuff like that, including my alcoholism, has made me realize that a lot of this stuff, like the kingdom of God is within you, or even when people are like manifest what you believe, or
mhm,
the Buddha is within you, or there's like you are your own God, right? Which is something that like, like Wu-Tang Clan calls each other God, because that's like part of what they believed, but also it was a step up from man. And
mhm.
because that was a step up from boy. You know what I'm saying? So it was a reaction to racism. And I'm starting to realize that like it's all just semiotics. It's all just language that's saying the same thing from different aspects of the world. And when it all comes down to it, it's just and out, in and out. It's just like
Yeah,
breathing, being present, and appreciating the existence that we have. And that's been really helping me deal with this like self-abandonment, because it is confusing, right? Because everyone has their own little angle, and it's like when that song doesn't isn't about me, I don't care. And so so when you say the kingdom of God is within me, I'm like, ugh. But if you were to say it any other way, that's just messaging. That's just advertising, baby. You know?
I man, I wish that I'll have to text it to you. Um, Actually, I'll just find it right now. There's another quote that I think it's a quote that I think about quite a bit, that goes off of what you brought up from the Book of Five Rings. Let me see here. Um, I hope that I can find it really quick instead of wasting time. Oh, okay. So I'm gonna read this. It's pretty quick, but it's a poem. O thou that settest out upon the path, false is the phantom that thou seekest. When thou hast it, thou shalt know all bitterness, thy teeth fixed in the Sodom apple. Thus hast thou been lured along that path, whose terror else had driven thee far away. O thou that stridest upon the middle of the path, no phantoms mock thee, for the stride's sake thou stridest. Thus art thou lured along that path, whose fascination else had driven thee far away. O thou that drawest toward the end of the path, effort is no more. Faster and faster dost thou fall. Thy weariness is changed into ineffable rest. For there is no thou upon that path. Thou hast become the way.
Okay. Yeah. Lots of thous in that one. That was thick.
Yeah, it's pretty. Yeah, it's very King James like. So,
No, wait, wait,
um,
wait. I have something that kind of proves what I just said. Here's a poem that I shared literally today about very similar, the similar content. It's called "What Is Now Will Soon Be Past." Just because you do it doesn't mean you always will. Whether you're dancing dust or breathing light, you're never exactly the same twice.
uh,
See, brevity is
I was
it's
gonna say Jody's out here showing off with a short poem. After I just read this Melville poem. Sorry about that.
that was Melville.
No, no, it was
Oh.
it's pretty long. It's pretty pedantic, but
It was, yeah, I know. I'm just trying to speak to our audience a little bit more, and I don't know if we have a lot of thous in this. Um,
that's okay. Maybe we'll get some evangelical Christians sometime who are just like King James only readers that'll
dude,
appreciate a vow.
that'd scare the shit out of me. But yeah, we should bring some more poetry into this shit. That's how I started, right? That's how I used to be big into poetry when I was 15, and I used to do poetry jams all around Atlanta. That was my
What?
thing. You didn't know that?
I feel
Yeah.
like we've talked about this. Like you did poetry in college. I didn't know about your pre-college poetry days.
Oh yeah, I used to drive all around Atlanta, hitting up poetry jams, and then when I got into college, I started a poetry jam in Milledgeville at this coffee shop called Blackbird, and it was like pretty successful. We would have regularly like 100 or so people show up for poetry in the middle of nowhere, Georgia. And there were all
Wow.
these like new poets that came in, and these people from like people would drive in from all around, mainly because it was the closest city that had anything going on. And yeah, I used to host that show, and that's where I started, making jokes on stage and getting a lot of stage work and stuff like that.
Huh.
Uh, and then I got fired because of my drinking. And I never really returned back to it. But yeah, a lot of this year has been me trying to return back to that kind of presence. And so bringing more
Hmm.
poetry into the podcast would be tight.
Yeah, let's do it. We got some. We can get some Mary Oliver in here.
Yeah,
Um,
that's very popular in yoga classes, some Mary
yeah,
Oliver.
I'm sure it is.
Well, I kind of wanted to ask you, like, so we're at the end of the year. Do you do resolutions, or do you have any sort of intentions for the next year, or like any reflections on this last year?
That's a good question. Um, I haven't thought about it, and I so on New Year's Eve or Christmas Eve rather, someone asked me what are your resolutions, and I feel like in hindsight I feel kind of like a jerk about this. It's like not the most fun guy, but I just said, I kind of feel like you should do that kind of stuff in March because there's no pressure about you. Like you wake up on like there's so many times where I said I'm going to quit drinking New Year's Eve and then wake up hungover and I do the whole year again the same. Um, and so I quit drinking in March because I thought like there's nothing going on in March. there's no pressure about a holiday, or there's no pressure about a resolution. And I was having dinner with, there was a priest at the table, and he like interjected and he said, "Oh, you know what that's called Lent. So you can just you can just stretch it and just like set intentions through that." Um, and so I thought that that's a good enough time as any, because I've just been so sick for since like November 3rd that I haven't really thought about what the next year is going to look like. I've just been trying to make it to the next day.
Sober
Um,
January is how I got sober the first time.
you what?
Sober January is how I got sober the first time. I took
How long was that?
30 days.
Oh, nice. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I broke up with my another terrible relationship and was sober for 30 days. Oh no, I was actually I ended up being sober for I want to say like 5 or 6 months. I think I ended up maybe longer, maybe even 8 months. I remember I got to like the end of the year and I ended up relapsing because of loneliness. But yeah, that was the very first time I ever gave it a shot back in 2012.
Well, with
Because
that success rate, do you have resolutions?
well, like I was saying, more intentionality and being present. And
Mm,
resolutions, there's like a weird uh pressure, and a
mm,
lot of people are like, "Oh, I'm gonna lose weight," which is just like I think more it's like about putting in more effort in the things that you want and changing habitual like your habitual things that are killing you or like stopping you from being who you want to be.
yeah,
And so a new year is always a good time to do it, mainly because all of us are in this kind of renewed state and we all want to like it's a good way to like find a community in that. Um, but it's a little easier too, just because January here in Chicago, January, February, and March, like it's just so fucking it's hibernation season. It
yeah.
is so cold. So it's like, what else are you gonna do but work on yourself? Read some books. But yeah, I think my biggest one is gonna be being more present, um, spending less time watching TV, more time reading, doing. Um, and I also really want to learn Spanish. So I'm gonna like double down on learning Spanish.
You and I can do it with each other because I'm taking Spanish this term.
Oh shit, yeah.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah. So we got that going for us already.
SDS awesome.
Well, in the spirit of Janus, the god of looking back and looking forward.
The two-faced god?
Yeah, yeah, the Two Face god.
Yeah.
Um, Looking back on this year, like, do you have anything that you want to like say is an accomplishment for you?
Yeah. Um, like I was saying, like this year I was fucking rock bottom again. I remember telling my therapist that I was like, why did I get sober?
Mm,
Why am I doing this? I don't
mm,
feel like anything has changed. And I was almost to a point where I was like, I might as well start drinking again because like I'm still living like a drunk. And instead of doing that, I I started making more steps. I'm a big fan of lists, so I made a huge fucking list of things, not like things that I wanted to do, but I made some plans um, to like change something. So one was like be a part of a bigger community.
mm,
And I made a list on how that's done. And the biggest one that I think was so helpful was something my therapist said was be aware of how you enter a room and the energy you bring when you enter a room, because that sets the tone of how people will interact with you. And I used to come into class, like jujitsu class, with like my headphones on and all kind of like stoned and like in my head. And I stopped doing that, and I started like making more of an effort to talk to people, get to know people, um, joke around a little bit more, open up a little bit more, and like make more of an effort to recognize when people are trying to connect with me, which I used to be like, ew, like, what's wrong with you? You like me? What's wrong with you? Um, and so that's been something like now I feel very like nice in my sober community or in my jujitsu community, which is also part of the sober community. I've like
Mm,
starting this podcast as part of that. Like I think one of the best things I've done this year is starting this podcast. And I think one of the things that has been so helpful of even start that even the thing that the catalyst for this podcast was me just going right into asking people what their biggest trauma is because
mm,
I started to realize that I was in so much pain that I needed to talk about it beyond just my therapist. And as I was talking to other people, I realized, oh shit, everyone's in fucking terrible pain. And so they all want to talk about it, but we all don't want to talk about it because we feel like, ugh, society doesn't let us. And so I've just been like rolling right into it.
mm,
And I brought that up to when I was like I when I was dating Leah, or I said that to her on our third date. I was like, "So what's your biggest trauma?" And then we stayed up all night talking about our traumas. And then she was reflecting about it and with her brother recently, and she told me this story that her brother was like, "Wow, what a great way to like build something. Like what a
mm,
great foundation." And I feel like I kind of stumbled on that uh, just because I needed to talk. There was a time when I remember I was like rolling with people and I'd be like, "Oh yeah, sorry, I'm having a little asthma. I learned it was a somatic response because of all the stuff that I suffered from as a kid." And then we only had like 2 minutes before the next roll, and I'm like trying to get it all out, and they're like,
yeah.
"Oh, okay, buddy," and and I think that's helped. I've also been really doubling down on concentrating. I think upping my ADHD medication has been really helpful. I think addressing my ADHD in different ways has been really helpful, and really like focusing on the things that I enjoy. I feel like I kind of fell into jujitsu and yoga because I was trying to escape the bad relationship I had at home, and I wanted to feel stronger. And now it's something that I truly enjoy. And I feel like I around like
Mm,
6 months ago, I started just being like, oh, I want to get like really into this. Instead of like, oh, I'm going to play a little guitar or I'm going to do a little comedy. I'm going to do a little this. I decided like, no, this is what I do. This is who I am. And this will define me. And then I started dating and I was like, yeah, this is what I do. This is who I am. This has defined me. And it was easier for me to not people please and not like change who I am, like, be a little chameleon like I used to be when I was a drunk, just so that they would like me because I was so desperate for that connection. It was easier for me to make better decisions on who would be better for my life. And
mm,
I feel like those are the biggest wins that I've had this year is bringing in this intentionality. And because of that, that's why I've been thinking about self-abandonment on a molecular level because now I'm finding it like, oh, I'm still doing that, but in these smaller moments. It used to be a bigger moment, and then I was like
yeah.
making these huge leaps, but now I'm realizing that the devil is in the details, and so I got to get in there. I mean, God is in the details too, so I got to get in there and like and like figure out where the right adjustments and calibrations need to be for me to finally kind of get to this point where I feel happier, where I feel more comfortable, and I feel more confident in the way that I flow through the world. I saw this tweet once that said, "The devil's in the details, God is in the details. Man, shit's going down in the details." Think about it all the time. What about
That's
you?
true. That's true.
You've had a
Um,
crazy year, man.
yeah, it's been a wild one. I uh, I I don't really know where to begin, but I think that in this time of there's a lot of good things and there's a lot of hard things that have happened this year. So I'm in this like liminal place of December, January. What are we doing? Um, it feels it feels good to kind of be on the other side of this year and also appreciating that there's still a lot to be done. Um, and in kind of in terms of like this self-abandonment stuff, like in relation to this relationship that I'm in right now, um, it you that what you said was really spoke to me about that question that you asked Leah on your third date, because um, I'm in a relationship right now where a lot of stuff is coming to the head, but it's kind of really nice in this. We talked about this before, where you're in a relationship that is a healing one,
Yeah.
where all these wounds are opening, but they're opening so that they can heal, and just trying to be aware of that process and just let the process happen, and also just kind of recognizing like I'm making great strides in where I want to go, and where I see myself in the future, which means that there's a lot of stuff that needs to be left behind,
Yeah.
and that's kind of the going back. Going back to what you were saying about self abandonment, letting things go is a part of that reconciliation with myself. Like I need to be able to look at myself and say, I'm doing this because I want a future for you. And that's why this is really painful, but it's going to work out. Like some of your friends aren't going to be your friends in 2 years,
Hmm.
5 years, 10 years. But what's going to happen is that you're going to have the life that I know that you can have. Um, and so, in the meantime, all these abandonment wounds have opened up, and just kind of appreciating that this is healing and it sucks, but I wouldn't be able to get here if I hadn't gone through the past 2 years of getting out of a bad situation, actually owning myself, and trying and just, I don't know, building a life that's not based on resentment. Just like resentment of yourself because of self abandonment, resentment of others because you put stuff onto them that you're not willing to take responsibility for. And just, I guess maybe this is like an intention to set, but just trying to cultivate agency in my life
Yeah.
where I'm not reacting to things. I'm not, nothing's happening to me. Things are happening
Because of you.
because of me.
Yeah. Being the catalyst instead of just,
Right.
yeah.
And that takes a lot of doing up top, because you got to like see like, oh man, I really kind of messed up a lot. That like no one put a gun to my head and told me to be an asshole for 10 years. And but being able to do that and just kind of going, all right, well, let's not be a jerk for the next 10 and see what happens. And don't put blame on everybody because you're too afraid of taking responsibility for your own actions. Um, and so I think that's where I kind of am right now, like really loving where I'm at, really loving who I am and who I'm becoming, and also just knowing that this is a part of it, like part of the process. I'm not who I will be next New Year's Eve, but I'm making strides so that whoever that is going to be someone I can be proud of.
Yeah. You know, Asia, who was on the podcast earlier,
Yeah.
uh, she brought this up in yoga the other day. She said, suffering is a blessing because it shows you what you need to discard, or he shows you what you need to detach from, I think it was, or
Mhm.
let go of. Suffering is a blessing because it shows you what you need to let go of. And I've been thinking about that a lot, and it's like you're saying, it's like there's a lot letting go is part of self-abandonment too. Holding on to things that don't serve you is part of abandoning you,
Right.
abandoning yourself, and when you're suffering, it's like, okay, what do like you can't just say woe is me. It's like, what do I need to let go of and what do I need to change to fix this? Um, yeah, yeah. You really that's really the struggle. That's the is about being present. It's about standing up for yourself, being aware of what energies you bring into a room and allowing yourself to be the catalyst of moments instead of just sitting back and being this like commenting NPC, like the balcony Muppets of your own life. Which is what I did. I was just the balcony Muppets of my own life. I can't think of their name, but you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, no, Waldorf or
Yeah,
something.
Stradler. Stratler, whatever, but what yeah,
Statler, Stratler.
yeah.
Um, I remember you made me think of this. My I wrote in a Substack piece a while ago, and my friend texted it back to me because they thought it was good. So this is a humble brag, of course, but you made me think of this. Um, I wrote, "Suffering is understood as a product of sin, whereas it can also be associated with struggling to be free of sin." And that's kind of that's the idea in my head of like suffering is a part of the healing process. Like it you can't really grow, and healing hurts a lot of the time.
Mhm.
And so to be free of all these things, like in using Buddhist terms, like being free of attachment and the I guess the stuff that produces suffering, it it requires you to let go of a lot and detach in a healthy way.
Yeah,
um and I don't
detach,
know.
disassociate. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I think the best blessing or one of the biggest blessings of this year was, rekindling our friendship and starting this podcast together. This shit's
Dude, for
been
real though.
extremely healthy for me and has been the the crux of a lot of my own healing and the building of my own community and bringing myself back into the spotlight outside of comedy and like it's I think it's helped a lot of people. I've had some people come up to me and tell me that it's been helping them, and that's such a great and relieving feeling. And that's all based on just our friendship. So I appreciate you, man. Thank you.
No, hey, thank you. Because remember, like a little over a year ago, you reached out to me because I was spiraling, and that was like the beginning of us talking again.
I think because you were sharing Jason Molina songs, or you were sharing
Uh,
a bunch of sad songs that I had on my like alcoholic playlist.
Justin Townes Earl songs.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Everybody was like liking it and going, "That's such a good song," and you were the only person reaching out to say, "Are you okay?"
It was like one is good, but I think you did like 5 in a
Yeah,
row,
I
and I was
posted like the
like, "Oh, I
whole
haven't seen this
album on
before. This is my
Instagram.
first year of being sober."
Yeah. So this like
The
the whole
silent
year, it was such a good thing to for us to be talking again like this in general, just because um I don't know, you just don't realize how lonely you are until you start talking to somebody and you go, "Oh man, I haven't had this in a long time."
yeah, yeah, that was good. I forgot about that.
Yeah. But that was like I think like to in terms of self-abandonment, like the reason that I think I was teetering on relapse, and sharing that sub unconsciously trying to get someone to stop me, which is a weakness. That shouldn't be I shouldn't be putting that on other people. I know that now, but in hindsight, there's I think it was interesting because the reason that I was interested in listening to sad bastard music as a substitute for drinking was because I wasn't listening to myself, and I was abandoning my intuition. I was abandoning my wants and my I don't know, the life that I could have, because I was still in that kind of people pleasing, um, lonely mode where I wasn't really owning who I was or owning who I wanted to become. And so, you know, being in that state was was almost a catalyst for maybe not relapse, but definitely that spirally thinking. Um,
That's why they drive in silence. They're listening to themselves. You solved the mystery for me.
there it is.
Wow. Well, I think that's a good place to. I think that's a full circle.
That's good. Yeah.
Good place to end it. Thanks for listening, everybody. I hope you guys have a great new year. I hope you stay sober. If you're sober curious, keep on. Um, and don't abandon yourself. See you later.
Later.